Hi grade 6, this is Miss Hallinan here. I'm hoping you're going to enjoy going on a field trip with me out into the forest so that we can see what we can observe growing under the trees and amongst the trees and maybe even above the trees today. As you can see, today I'm more prepared than I was in the last video I made. I'm dressed right for the weather and have the proper footwear on so that we can go into the woods safely. And I'm just going to give that caveat now that if you are planning to go out yourself into a forest nearby where you live, please ensure that you're dressed right, that somebody knows where you're going, and that you take the proper safety precautions, because there are many wild animals and birds that live out in the forest, and it can be a dangerous place if you don't know what you're doing or where you're going. So please do that with caution. One of the things that we can see here is a good view of the forest floor. So the forest floor is where many decomposers live, and their job is to decompose deadfall items like these, dead tree branches, the leaves that fall onto the ground. And they break down those items back into the soil and regenerate the nutrient value in the soil. Let's see if we can find a close-up of some decomposers today. So here we can see, I just overturned a bit of horse poop, horse manure. My horses come out into this forest. And we can see that there's a ladybug living under there. And there were some ants that scurried away into the tall grass, or it's not tall grass, it's taller weeds though. And so all kinds of bugs and millipedes, centipedes, salamanders, ants. There's a spider that live on the floor of the forest, help to decompose any of these items back into the soil. Today I'm really hoping that we come across an area where there will be some rose bushes, because I would really like to harvest some rose hips to make rose hip tea. There's some more moss growing on this fallen log, and you can see that animals have been burrowing holes in here. I'm thinking that this was the work of a woodpecker at one point when the tree was still standing. Sometimes birds will nest in those holes. And we can see that as the tree is decomposing, the wood gets really soft. It's kind of spongy and squishy as it rots back down into the earth. Looks like this whole tree fell over in a windstorm or something. Let's see what else we can find. I can hear the birds singing today. Many birds would live in the trees. I know there's been a female mule deer living out here for most of the summer. I actually have video footage of her in the field behind my house, which I'll include in this video. Mule deer are a really interesting animal because when they run, they hop like they have springs for feet. Here's some more deadfall. We're getting into an area now in the forest where we're finding more shrubs. Here's some. Clover's helping to show it, when they're turning to fall colors, and we're seeing that they're starting to produce fruit. And that's what I'm hoping to find today, is a spot to pick rose hips. So here we are, actually. Here's a nice rose bush. It's turned yellow now, and it's full of rose hips, which makes a wonderful, wonderful tea. People also pay a lot of money to buy rose hip infused facial oils and creams. Rose hips are really nice to harvest when they turn red like this, but also after a good frost. One of these little tiny fruit packages has more vitamin C and nutrients than 20 oranges. So really, this is a superfood. And while people will pay a lot of money for those facial serums, really we can harvest it ourselves if we know what we're looking for. So during the summer months, this plant would be full of beautiful pink flowers. Roses, the Alberta rose, which is the flower of our province. Oops. On this tree, along with the moss, we can see that there's another decomposer, which is fungus or mushroom. And some lichen growing there. As we go deeper into the forest, we can see not only the forest floor and that the plants are starting to get a little taller, but we're starting to get into some poplar trees. We learned about poplar trees in one of the last videos that I made. The poplars are starting to turn a lovely yellow now as we get closer to the turning of the fall season. And here we have some more rose hips, and they get really lovely and juicy when they're ripe, and you can squeeze them and eat this inner fruit part. Rose hips have a light flavor. They're not super flavorful, but they are sure packed with a lot of nutritional value. So I've made an offering of tobacco, as I was taught by my Indigenous friends who are helping me learn more about living off the land. And again, we do that just out of respect and to honor all that the plants are providing for us. And so when we learned about making spruce needle tea, we learned that the early explorers were dying from something called scurvy, which was caused by a lack of vitamin C. Rose hips are another one of those natural foods that provide us with a lot of vitamin C. And as you can see, we can harvest them in the fall time here. That's when they're ready to be harvested. Look at that. They just look delicious and beautiful. Now this is an exciting find. Can you tell what that is? It's a moose shed, a moose horn shed. So Clover, my dog, is sniffing it and checking it out. So male moose, bull moose, and deer shed their antlers every year and grow a new set of antlers. And so it's a natural process that happens. This looks like it was actually quite a good sized moose. And so you can see that they just break off from the animal's head. They fall off after rutting season, which we are in now, I think. I would have to ask some of my friends who are hunters. For sure, it's getting into the rutting season for elk right now. And sometimes when I'm on my property, interestingly enough, I can hear the elk bugling because there's an elk farm quite close to where I live. So there's a fellow who raises elk, and then in the fall time I can hear them bugling and bugling when they're calling to their female friends. So this is an interesting find, and it does look like it's been here for a little while because you can see that it has, you know, some of those decomposing natural elements are growing on it. Antlers also become food for other animals that live in the forest. Porcupines love to nibble on antlers. And so for some people, it's quite a good recreational activity for them to go out into hay fields and into the bushes to look for sheds. And people who I know who do that usually start on Boxing Day. But early in the spring, when the snow is just about melted completely, is also a good time to go out and look for antlers. So here's some evidence of something that lives in the trees. There's a type of bird called a magpie, which builds these nests out of branches. I'm going to see if I can get a little bit closer to show you. It basically looks like a pile of sticks. But the magpies make their nests, and they will use the same nest year after year. Magpies are a black and white bird with a black and white feather. In indigenous culture, sometimes they will use those magpie feathers to make headdresses and other ceremonial items. This owl's been living just behind my house in the bushes all summer. And one night he was flying with me as I was walking down the road, which was a neat experience. Squirrels are another animal that live in the trees. And as you can see, Clover loves to bark at them and jump up at them. She's never actually caught a squirrel, but there are many squirrels that live in the trees in my property. When we returned from our hike in the forest, my uncle was interested to see the moose shed that we found. He was telling me that he thinks it's illegal to remove animal parts from the forest. I will do some research to see if that's true and be sure to return the antler to the forest if so. He was also telling me that he thought my brother could help me distinguish the size of the antler. There's a mathematical formula that helps you do that. Overall, we had a successful and safe hike through the forest, and we found enough rose hips to make some rose hip tea, which we will show in a video later. I hope you've enjoyed this video.